Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to committee this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for making the time change. I am excited to call to order our Behavioral Health Committee. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Chair Braybeck.
Here.
Representatives Arbit.
Here.
Pohutsky.
Here.
Glanville.
Present.
Edwards.
Here.
McDonald.
Present.
Reingens.
Here.
Schmaltz.
Here.
Hoadley.
Here.
St. Germain.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 11 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I really appreciate it. Representative Edwards moves to adopt the minutes from our May 25th meeting. Without objection, the meetings are adopted. Today we're going to be taking up two bills, 4616 and 4617, that address the issue of conversion therapy and a ban on conversion therapy. This has been there's been, I feel like, historic time getting to this place. So I'm excited for us to be able to take it up and discuss it. I'm grateful for everyone who is here. So thank you to everyone who is here. And at the beginning, we're going to go at ease so that Vice Chair Arbit can chair the meeting so that I can testify along with my colleagues. So we'll go at ease.
The House Policy Subcommittee on Behavioral Health will come to order, and we will now hear testimony on House Bills 4416, introduced by Representative Braybeck, and 4617, introduced by Representative Hoskins. Here to testify in support of House Bills 4616 and 4617 are Representative Braybeck, Representative Hoskins, and Senator McMorrow.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Members, we're grateful to be here today. This is a day that I have been anxiously awaiting since I got to join the legislature. As all of you know, I've talked about before, I've been a therapist for almost 30 years with a master's degree in clinical social work and a doctorate in clinical psychology. And this is an issue that I have known as a therapist for decades. I've known this as one that deserves our attention and our advocacy around changing and shutting down. Conversion therapy is a practice of attempting to change one's individual's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression to align with heterosexual or cisgender norms. As an example, it's a practice of trying to convert an individual from gay to straight. As a practicing mental health clinician, I believe that this practice is dangerous, it lacks credible evidence-based premise, and has damaging repercussions on individuals who are on the receiving end of it. In short, this practice, misleadingly named conversion therapy, is so because it is not a proven therapy. As I mentioned before, it's damaging, it's dangerous, and it's harmful to our youth. I can tell you firsthand how incredibly heartbreaking it is to hear from now adults who have had to endure conversion therapy only to experience increased levels of distress at the time and later in life. This not only speaks to what happens to them later in life, but the immense trauma that happens when they experience this kind of, again, this practice as a direct result of the exposure to it. But it's not only my practice and folks who I've gotten to work with that informs my opinion about conversion therapy. There have been many studies that have shown how dangerous this practice is. Folks who receive conversion therapy are more likely to experience severe depression, increased anxiety, substance use and abuse issues, and increased suicidal ideation, intent, and attempts than peers who don't. The Journal of American Medical Association, peer-reviewed journal, recently completed a study. It was in 2021. And they focused on both the economic and the humanistic impacts on young adults who were on the receiving end of this practice. Here's what they found. They found on a humanistic level that conversion therapy may exacerbate distress or incite guilt, shame, and self-hatred, and is associated with devastating mental and physical health consequences, including new or increased depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicidal ideation, nightmares, gastrointestinal distress, sexual dysfunction, relationship problems, and isolation. Interesting, they also spoke to the economic impacts. Here's what they found. They found that the downstream consequences associated with lifetime costs for individuals are almost $84,000. And those are primarily associated with suicidality, anxiety, severe psychological distress, depression, and substance abuse. From a population perspective, so if we kind of go out and have a 30,000-foot view, the total costs are about $650 million for any sort of change efforts, which is that's how it's referred to now. But there are harms associated with an estimated economic burden of $9.2 billion. So think about that economic impact on our communities. Many states have actually recognized this, and they've made attempts to ban this. We would be the 22nd state to do this. It's noteworthy that of the 21 states who have already done this and banned this practice, 7 of those were led by our colleagues across the aisle and Republican governors. In fact, the first Republican governor to do this was then Governor Chris Christie a decade ago. In 2013, he did this. In 2020, Utah banned conversion therapy, and their law was signed into effect by Republican Governor Gary Herbert. And most notably, it was voted out of their legislature unanimously. And I say that to point out that this isn't a partisan issue. This is a mental health issue, and our colleagues throughout the country are noticing that. There are many associations who support the banning of this pseudoscientific menacing practice. Some are here today, and you'll hear from some today, but I just wanted to briefly mention some. The American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Counseling Association, Mental Health America, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Federation of Teachers, and the National Association of School Nurses. And that's just to name a few. Chair, I'm really grateful to be here to talk about this really important issue and allowing me to testify on this. Throughout today's testimony, you're going to hear how detrimental and harmful and devastating this practice is, and that's not to mention its long-lasting impacts. But we can do something to protect the future of Michiganders from being subjected to this very, very dangerous practice, and I urge your support on these House bills.
Thank you, Chair Arbit and members of the committee, for having me here in the other chamber. It's a real pleasure to be here. I've been working on this legislation for my entire time in the legislature since 2019. I worked on it last term with Representative Brabeck, and there were many legislators who worked on this well before even I came to the legislature. So this has been an issue that has been a long time coming, and I'm very grateful that we're finally having a hearing to discuss the impacts of this. I have heard really heartbreaking stories throughout my time in the legislature, just thinking about my own experience of growing up. It's hard enough to grow up no matter what your identity is. And to be told as a child that who you are is wrong and that you are somehow broken is absolutely devastating. I was recently with a group of parents here in Michigan, in my district, and one of the often under-discussed issues as it relates to this legislation is actually an issue of consumer protection. This parent who wanted to do what was right by their child, who recognized that she was very similar to myself. I am somebody who is not queer, and I don't understand from personal experience what somebody may be going through. This was the same experience of this mother, and she wanted to help her child. So she sought out a licensed mental health professional, a therapist, to help her child navigate through these experiences. And what she found was that unknowing to her, this therapist was not helping their child navigate through feelings and understanding who they are and building their own confidence. They were trying to convert them. They were telling them that their feelings, who they were, their identity was wrong. And it took their child backwards. Just how heartbreaking is that? You're already trying to help them move forward, and then you have to rebuild by not knowing that when you take your child, when you find a licensed mental health care professional, that they may be doing harm and not actually helping your child. So, as you've heard, the overwhelming consensus from more than a dozen major medical and psychological associations is that homosexuality is not something that can be, or more importantly, needs to be cured. And that's what this does. It treats it as something that is wrong, that needs to be fixed, and that is fundamentally flawed. This is not therapy at all. It really amounts to child abuse. It's hard enough, from a parent's perspective, to find a quality mental health professional as it is. There's a shortage. It's hard to find the right person. It's hard to get on a waiting list. It takes months and months and months to find somebody. Parents deserve to know that when they hire a licensed mental health professional, that professional is operating only with reputable practices and in the best interest of their child, not inflicting harm on them. It's time that Michigan joined the 21 other states around the country in protecting children and prohibiting licensed mental health professionals from engaging in this long discredited, incredibly dangerous practice when they work with minors. And we welcome your support.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and as well as members of the committee for taking up this legislation. I just want to, again, thank Chair Brayback and Senator McMorrow for introducing this legislation this term as well as in previous terms. Thank them so much for lending their voice to a community that sometimes is rendered voiceless. What the practice of conversion therapy is really rooted, as both Chair Brayback and Senator McMorrow have said, is kind of rooted in the belief that something is wrong with you if you are part of the LGBTQ community, that you need to be fixed, that you're broken, and that you need to be cured. And this type of thinking only allows discrimination to flourish here in the state. It actually creates the exact atmosphere, fear and bigotry that would create, that would cause someone to want to even seek out conversion therapy in the first place. And I can tell you, as someone who has known they were gay for a very long time, and I'm thriving, I can tell you that I don't need to be cured, and nor do any other LGBTQ members of our community here in Michigan. I know that many have looked in the past at the LGBTQ community as a group that needs to be fixed, and time has shown that that is absolutely not true. We're just like everybody else. We don't need to be cured, and we can't be cured, quote unquote cured, more than any other person can be cured of their identities. But I do understand why someone would even try to make the decision or think about making the decision to seek out conversion therapy. I get it. I understand how cruel this world could be sometimes. I understand being nervous that every move you make might give you away, making sure that your voice sounds a certain way, your hands aren't moving a certain way, you're not walking a certain way, because if you do, it could give you away, and that could be invitation for an onslaught of slurs or bullying, or even something worse. I understand looking for and sometimes desperately seeking a way out, options to be able to not have to deal with that kind of bigotry in your life. Living authentically is hard, and there are moments in life that can be so bleak, it's hard to see a future. And I also can understand why a parent would not want to, of course, have their children subjected to that. And they would also want to find options for their children to not have to deal with that. I understand that that is something that none of us, I'm sure, want to see our kids go through anything like that, to be ostracized like that. And so you look for options, but this is not the one. This is not the answer. Science and many experts are going to testify before you today and talk about why this is not only not the answer, but it actually causes more problems. There are people here who are going to be able to say why conversion therapy is such a discredited practice, what actual therapy should look like, and how it does help in affirming someone's identity. My colleague shared statistics and why this is important to continue to pursue for our LGBTQ youths. Here, we heard that in the Senate, and Representative Brayback kind of highlighted it, the amount of suicide attempts that we have to that are faced or contemplated by LGBTQ youth here in Michigan. Experts here today will demonstrate that this practice has been discredited by every major medical and mental health organization, as my colleagues have kind of highlighted here. And we know today we have so much more of an understanding of what good mental health practices are and why we don't need to have this here in Michigan. The answer is certainly not conversion therapy. The answer is knowledge and love and acceptance here in the state. When we ban conversion therapy here, we do more to protect our children from this dangerous practice. We send an affirming message across our entire state. We're creating a safer space here where people can be their authentic selves without the fear of societal rejection. This is a step in the right direction to let innocent children know that they are loved and their world is a better place with them in it. I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that when I was younger. And so I hope all of you out there that know if you're gay or you're straight or you're trans, the world is a better place with you in it. And it's a better place when you live authentically and openly as yourself. We make the world around us a much more honest place when we are more inclusive and more accepting and more open. So, thank you so much for listening to our testimony. I'm looking forward to hearing questions or any thoughtful discussion on how we can best protect Michigan youths here. And I'll just say Happy Pride Month.
Before we go to questions, I just want to say thank you so much to Chair Brayback, Senator McMorrow, and Representative Hoskins for being here and for your leadership in introducing this bill. And it's very meaningful for me to be presiding over this bill. Particularly, I am the youngest openly gay person ever elected to the legislature, and it's not all that long ago when I remember wishing that I could have this. And I'm very grateful that it never escaped the bounds of my mind. And how many people, young people for whom that is not the case. Because I'm so glad that I never had access to the garbage that is this practice. And so I'm really grateful that all of you are here leading the fight to make sure that we are protecting our kids, because that is exactly what this is. So thank you. Any questions from the committee? Okay, well, the committee will go at ease.
All right, the Behavioral Health Subcommittee will come back to order. We're now going to hear additional testimonies on House Bills 4616 and 4617. We're going to start, and we have our list of folks on our agenda who are going to testify, and then we have cards and folks who are also going to be testifying. We're going to leave space and room for that as well. But first, I'd like to welcome Dr. Joy Wolf-Enser, up. Dr. Wolf-Enser is the past president of the Michigan Psychological Association. Welcome, Dr. Wolf-Enser. I'm going to ask all folks who are going to be testifying in front of us to keep your comments to around 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Brabeck and members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of Michigan Psychological Association. The mission of MPA is to improve the health of the people in Michigan by advancing the science, education, and practice of psychology. The science and ethics of psychology require us first to do no harm, and second, to use only those treatments that have a solid evidence basis for their effectiveness in treating diagnosed disorders. MPA stands in support of HB 4616 and 4617 to prohibit mental health professionals from engaging in so-called conversion therapy with minors. I have handouts for those of you who are interested in learning more about what is formally known as sexual orientation and gender identity conversion efforts, or SOGICE for short. But for now, there are 3 main reasons that MPA supports these bills. First, conversion efforts rely on the assumption that there is something wrong, problematic, or ill about being LGBTQ. In fact, decades of research have demonstrated that diversity in sexual orientation and gender identity represents normal, healthy variation in human experience, variations that are meant to be affirmed and not shamed or dissuaded. Conversion efforts, therefore, are not therapy at all, but rather an expression of stigma that have no place in professional mental health care. Second, there's no scientific evidence to indicate that conversion therapy results in changing young people's sexual orientations or gender identities. Rigorous research, backed by widely tested scientific theory, indicates that conversion efforts simply do not do what they claim. Decades of studies have attempted but failed to show that such efforts result in changing individuals' sexual orientations or gender identities. Third, as you've already heard, there's compelling evidence that conversion therapy inflicts significant harm on a population of young people that, because of societal responses to their sexual minority status, is already marginalized, stigmatized, and at risk for negative mental health outcomes. Studies from many different research labs using a variety of methods with large and diverse samples of LGBTQ youth all show that conversion efforts are associated with serious harm, including depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and suicide attempts. They show that conversion efforts are, and I quote, the strongest predictor of multiple suicide attempts even after adjustment for other known risk factors. Young LGBTQ individuals reporting suicidality after having undergone SOGICE represent an extremely vulnerable population that would benefit from additional protections and support, close quotes. In spite of these findings, conversion efforts persist. In a recent national survey of LGBTQ youth, 5% of Michigan youth had survived conversion efforts and 10% had been threatened with them. Even though they have no scientific or evidence-based home in psychology or professional mental health, LGBTQ youth in our state can still be exposed to conversion efforts in individual therapy, group meetings, and residential programs, and in all such settings may be subjected to methods that include aversive conditioning and abuse. MPA has long stood opposed to conversion efforts, and the evidence base for prohibiting them has only grown stronger over time. 21 states and the District of Columbia have passed prohibitions of conversion efforts for minors in mental health treatment. We urge you to join them in protecting our youth from conversion efforts and in protecting the integrity of professional mental health care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf-Enser. Any questions, colleagues? Thank you. Next, we will have Melina Braun, the Director of Policy and Advocacy for the National Association of Social Workers. Welcome, Melina.
Thank you. It's great seeing some friendly faces and some social workers on this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon in support of the ban of this dangerous practice of conversion therapy. As mentioned, my name is Melina Brand. I am a licensed social worker, and I have the honor today of representing social workers across the state through my position as Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Michigan chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. Social workers are the largest providers of behavioral health across the state, with over 30,000 licensed professionals and additional 6,500 students completing their work in social work degrees across the state. NASW has been a longtime partner in the fight to end conversion therapy, also referred to as reparative therapy or sexual orientation change efforts. As a profession ethically charged with improving individual, community, and societal welfare, NASW believes conversion therapy damages all three, often in irreparable ways. The NASW Code of Ethics mandates all social workers respect the dignity and inherent worth of a person. Conversion therapy is utterly contrary to this mandate. Instead, conversion therapy is rarely, if ever, self-initiated. LGBTQ individuals, usually youth, are coerced into empirically disproven treatment by their families, schools, peer groups, and faith institutions. These youth are inundated with messages of them being fundamentally wrong, urged to hate themselves, and see themselves as broken individuals who can only be fixed by rejecting their self-identity in favor of a falsehood. That is not dignity. That is not self-worth. As licensed professionals, we are required to do no harm and work within the rules and laws that govern our practice. Any licensed professional that is performing conversion therapy knows that they are in violation of their license and their professional code of ethics. The entire purpose of a license is to protect the public from harmful practice, and certainly conversion therapy falls within that definition. Conversion therapy efforts often encourage family rejection and undermine self-esteem, connectedness, and caring, which are all important factors against suicidal ideation and attempts. Young people who have experienced high levels of family rejection face serious health risks, including being 8 times more likely to report having suicide attempts and 6 times more likely to report high levels of depression. While we often might not hear that the media or through professional regulation about conversion therapy occurring in Michigan, it is still happening. As someone just mentioned, statistics from the Trevors Project, a nonprofit dedicated to LGBTQ suicide prevention, who I know is also here today, they report that 10% of Michigan's LGBT youth have been threatened with the possibility of conversion therapy as of 2022, and another 5% reporting that they've already been subjected to it. What is equally startling is that nearly 50% of LGBTQ youth in Michigan seriously considered suicide in the past year, and 1/4 reported that they had actually made an attempt. It is sobering to contemplate the potential number of victims from conversion therapy that are no longer living because of this practice that drove them to suicide. High rates of suicide causality make conversion therapy a particularly challenged practice to quantify, as its victims cannot speak up and its practitioners are cunning enough to know that admitting that performing this practice would cause severe professional or legal consequences. It is our hope that the passing of House Bills 4616 and 4617 will bring some sort of vindication and reconciliation to many of the young people who have been traumatized by this ineffective and unethical practice, as well as put a concrete stop to this practice by any licensed professional in the state. Thank you again for the opportunity to voice our support, and please know that your vote today will save lives.
Thank you, Melina. Colleagues, any questions? Thank you, Melina. I appreciate you being here. Next, we have Michelle Milhouse, who's a school psychologist with the Michigan Association of School Psychologists. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much for providing me the opportunity to speak with you today. It's quite an honor. My name is Michelle Milhouse, and I serve as the chair of the School Psychologist Shortage Committee for the Michigan Association of School Psychologists. I'm also the parent of a transgender child. I've worked with LGBTQ youth as a school psychologist across urban, suburban, and rural areas for the past 18 years. The Michigan Association of School Psychologists endorses full support of HB 4617 and HB 4616, which ban conversion therapy for individuals under the age of 18. Conversion therapy, which attempts to change one's gender and sexual orientation, has been banned in 21 states and 70 municipalities. Conversion therapy is a harmful practice, but it's been renounced by all major medical and mental health organizations. The American Psychological Association conducted an extensive literature review in 2009 that looked at the research on conversion therapy for the past 40 years and concluded that no data is available to support the practice of conversion therapy. The APA found that conversion therapy is a harmful practice that increases levels of depression, anxiety, and suicidality among individuals who identify as LGBTQ when compared with those who have not received this service. A study completed by San Francisco State University indicates that individuals who've had conversion therapy are 3 times more likely to use illegal drugs and 6 times more likely to report high levels of depression when compared with those who have not received this modality of treatment. A peer-reviewed study published in the American Journal of Public Health found that LGBTQ youth who undergo conversion therapy are 2 times more likely to attempt suicide and 2.5 times more likely to have multiple suicide attempts within a year compared with those who have not received the form of therapy. The American Association of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry noted that people who were given conversion therapy are more likely to be unemployed and have lower household income than those who were not provided with treatment. In addition to the concerns with the efficacy of conversion therapy, the American Psychological Association and other mental health organizations have outlined it's an unethical practice. Based on the Code of Ethics, mental health providers should not engage in therapeutic interventions that increase the risk for suicide and distress among clients. The role of the therapist is to provide mental health supports that improve mental health outcomes. Engaging in practices that increase the likelihood of suicide is clearly unethical and harmful to Michigan's LGBTQ youth. Further, therapists who provide conversion therapy are not required to disclose to parents they're utilizing the practice or share the negative side effects of this practice. The lack of transparency with parents and clients about the harmfulness of conversion therapy is clearly an ethical violation for school psychologists and other mental health providers. So imagine for a moment that you have a child who identifies as LGBTQ and who is also suicidal. You check your child to the therapist's office. During the initial meeting, the therapist discussed their overview of their practices, but does not disclose that they practice conversion therapy. Like many parents, you'd put your trust in this provider, drop your child off at the therapy office, and over the course of several months, your child is subjected to conversion therapy without your knowledge. And they experience an increase in suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, and perhaps even suicide attempts. So this practice is occurring each day in Michigan and other states that do not have a ban on conversion therapy. Black box warnings are required for medications that may increase the risk of suicidality, and physicians share harmful side effects of medical procedures prior to surgery, but mental health providers are not mandated legally to disclose that they're performing conversion therapy or provide parents with information about the negative and potential lethal outcomes of the practice. So according to the UCLA Williams Institute and the Trevor Project, 5% of children in Michigan have been given conversion therapy, and 13% of youth in the United States have received this service. Those numbers, unfortunately, are on the lower end. There's certainly more children who've been provided with the practice that hasn't been disclosed. More specifically, 500,000 children each year are provided with conversion therapy, despite the lack of research to support the practice. Many of these children receive this treatment without parental knowledge or parental consent. So in addition to the ethical concerns, conversion therapy is an expensive form of treatment. The Journal of the American Medical Association estimates that $9.23 billion is spent on conversion therapy and the reparations associated with the practice each year. The American Medical Association also reports the cost of conversion therapy over the course of a lifetime, and with the reparations associated with it, is $100,000 per person. The cost of treatment and time that practitioners are utilizing to engage in unsafe practices is of significant concern. In Michigan and many other states, we're in the midst of a mental health crisis. Youth must wait 6 to 9 months to receive therapy services due to long waiting lists and the shortage of practitioners. A statistic was recently published that 50% of youth in the United States who are hospitalized for suicide do not receive follow-up therapy due to long waiting lists as well as barriers faced by their families. So the use of conversion therapy in Michigan and other parts of the United States is preventing youth from receiving research-based treatments, as some therapists are engaged in unethical and harmful practices. The state of Michigan requires basic safety standards for hospitals, medical offices, and other places where people receive medical treatment. The same practices should be applied to therapeutic interventions. One of the roles of the government is to protect the citizens. The government has laws against drinking and driving to ensure the roads are safe, and other various laws to protect citizens, yet we allow the practice of conversion therapy to continue in Michigan. 40 years of research outlines this is an unsafe form of treatment that increases suicidality among youth. We would not allow a doctor to engage in surgical practices that are 2 to 2.5 more times likely to end in death. The same standard should be applied to the therapeutic setting. So So the data is clear that conversion therapy is clearly a harmful practice that should be banned in Michigan. You have the chance to make a difference in the lives of LGBTQ youth and stand on the right side of history like legislators have done in 21 other states. Will you join many others who've gathered here today to support a ban on conversion therapy and save the lives of children in Michigan?
Thank you so much. Colleagues, questions for Ms. Millhouse? Thank you so much. We really appreciate your testimony. Okay. Next, we have Gwen Stembridge. Gwen is from the Trevor Project, and she is the Advocacy Campaign Manager. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you so much, Chair and Committee. Really appreciate your time today. So good afternoon. My name is Gwen Stembridge. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm here today testifying on behalf of the Trevor Project, the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ young people. We work every day to build a kinder and safer world for LGBTQ young people by providing support through free and confidential 24/7 telephone, lifeline, chat, and text platforms, in addition to nationally respected research that you've heard referenced today. To further our mission of ending LGBTQ youth suicide, Trevor is dedicated to seeing the end of conversion therapy, which can go by many names, but in spirit is practitioner-centered instead of patient-centered. It incorporates unethical, unfounded, and impossible goals of changing someone's innate sexual orientation or gender identity, an innate quality that we all have, and causes irreparable harm to young people. In our opposition to the practice of conversion therapy, we are aligned with every major medical and mental health organization who has rejected these practices as profoundly harmful and founded on unscientific theories that have been debunked for decades. Trevor also conducts in-depth research into issues impacting the mental health of the youth we serve. Our 2022 National Survey on the Mental Health of LGBTQ Young People surveyed nearly 34,000 respondents between the ages of 13 and 24. And those statistics have been quoted already here today, so I will save us a little bit of time and move to a piece related more specifically to Michigan. So you can read about these studies in the peer-reviewed articles from the American Journal of Public Health. But in Michigan, the Trevor Project served over 6,000 contacts last year, which we estimate is just a portion of the 58,000 LGBTQ youth in Michigan who seriously consider suicide each year. Nationally, many of the young people that we serve are conversion therapy survivors or are afraid that their families might put them through this. Our crisis counselors don't ask about conversion therapy directly when a youth calls us in crisis, but in the last year, 1,300 contacts from more than 600 cities across the U.S. explicitly raised this topic themselves. Far from being arbitrary, similar laws and regulations have been consistently upheld with bipartisan legislatures and signed by 7 Republican governors across the country. They've also been found to be carefully crafted and narrowly tailored to protect the mental health and well-being of LGBTQ youth, fully consistent with the mandate that professional licensing boards are entrusted with to ensure that those who act under the authority of a government-issued license offer care that is ethical, evidence-based, and effective. Conversion therapy is none of those things. One more piece of research I will share with you. Medical experts have known for decades that conversion therapy contributes to elevated rates of mental health struggles, including depression, anxiety, substance use, and suicide attempts, as you have heard here today. But last year, another peer-reviewed journal of the American Medical Association published an article which used health economics to find that the annual direct cost of conversion therapy in the United States is $650 million. And that's just the direct costs. The indirect costs associated with depression, suicide attempts, hospital visits, all of those things totals more than $8 billion with a B. While it's powerful to hear these harms put in terms of dollars and cents, I'm here to remind you that those astronomical figures represent the suffering of real individuals, real people, our friends, our neighbors, folks that we know about, folks that we don't know about, and children that are in your life at church, at synagogue, wherever you encounter them. So we really want all youth in Michigan to grow up knowing that they are loved, that they are supported, and that they have every opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stembridge. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Stembridge? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have folks who have joined us today, either in person or via Zoom, who are going to testify. The first we have is Gregory Baylor, who is Senior Counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Mr. Baylor, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, my name is Greg Baylor, and I serve as Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to offer testimony on HB 4616 and 4617. I wanted to focus on two primary concerns that we have with this legislation. First, that it violates the First Amendment, and second, that it will harm rather than help children and teens experiencing gender dysphoria. First, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit has twice struck down virtually identical laws, and the Supreme Court itself has recently questioned the validity of similar laws enacted in New Jersey and California. Now, there's a really good chance that the Supreme Court will soon take up the issue head on, and I suggest respectfully that it would be prudent for the legislature to wait before adopting a law that's almost certainly unconstitutional. Second, there's a very high likelihood that this proposal, if adopted, will actually do more harm than good. Now, how doctors and therapists should care for gender dysphoric young people is a profoundly challenging question. Some folks advocate what is generally called, quote, watchful waiting, while others urge clinicians to focus on the comorbidities that often accompany gender identity issues in children. But many claim that the best thing to do for such children is to affirm their cross-sex identification, to do so through things like social transitioning, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and ultimately surgery. I do think it's fair to say that the legislation that you're considering today reflects this last view. It forbids healthcare providers from trying to help children bring their self-perception into alignment with their bodies. And at the same time, it expressly says that it's okay to help kids, quote, transition. The problem with this view is that the evidence just doesn't support it. Renowned psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Levine recently published a comprehensive overview of the evidence regarding whether so-called gender-affirming care is the proper response to young people presenting with gender dysphoria. His paper recounts how public health authorities in Finland, Sweden, and the UK concluded, quote, that the risk-benefit ratio of youth gender transition ranges from unknown to unfavorable. The paper then observes how health officials in these countries are backing away from rushing into transitioning kids and moving towards a more conservative approach that looks at, among other things, the other mental health conditions that gender dysphoric kids often present with. And just last week, Norway made a similar move. Now, the lack of evidence that the interventions promoted by the proposed legislation actually help kids is not the only problem. The more serious problem is that there is a growing body of evidence that these interventions are actually harmful when it comes to gender dysphoric children. Certain of the surgical procedures that are performed render children sterile for life and severely compromise, if not entirely eliminate, their capacity to experience sexual pleasure. Other harms from so-called gender affirmation include compromised bone health, altered brain development, and cardiovascular complications. On top of all that, the overwhelming majority of children experiencing gender dysphoria will eventually align their minds with their bodies if they are just allowed to go through puberty without so-called gender-affirming interventions. And this reality really challenges the assertion that I've heard made many times in this hearing that gender identity is innate and fixed and unchangeable. I think the whole theory of gender theory is that it is changeable and it is fluid. So I think there's an enormous inconsistency there that's worth noting. I think it also bears noting that the vast majority of kids who, if they're just essentially left alone or they have watchful waiting or they address their comorbidities rather than undergoing gender affirming care, will eventually identify as gay or lesbian. So it's fair to say that the pathway that this bill will foster and promote is essentially converting gay kids into transgender kids. It's not just me saying this. Dr. Matt Bristow of the UK's Tavistock Gender Clinic stated that he had a guy who worked at the clinic said he had come to feel that the clinic was performing, and these are the words he used, quote, conversion therapy on gay kids, converting them from gay to transgender. He stated that there was a dark joke on the clinical team that, quote, there would be no gay people left at the rate we're going. Now, going back to Dr. Levine, he's also testified under oath that there are no studies that show with any methodological or statistical validity that affirmation of transgender identity in young children reduces suicide or suicidal ideation or improves long-term outcomes as compared to other therapeutic approaches. He also stated that in light of what is known and not known about the impact of affirmation on the incidence of suicide, suicidal ideation, and other indicators of mental and physical health, it is scientifically baseless and therefore unethical to assert that a child or adolescent who expresses an interest in a transgender identity will kill him or herself unless adults and peers affirm that child in a transgender identity, close quote. I respectfully encourage members of the committee to just please take a pause and study the evidence a little bit more, and also see what happens in the Supreme Court before passing a bill that almost certainly violates the Constitution and will do more harm than good. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Baylor. Representative Pohutsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question for you is, you talked a lot about gender affirming care, which according to you and the two doctors that you listed, is still a question as to whether it is a standard of care, even though multiple mental health organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, agree that gender affirming care is the correct course of action. But regardless, we're not talking about that. We're talking about conversion therapy. So is your assertion that we should allow conversion therapy, which, to be perfectly clear, includes things like inflicting pain on children, forcing them to throw up anytime there is some type of stimulus that is considered, homosexual or, against their gender assigned at birth. Is your assertion that we should keep that practice in place until you feel satisfied that gender affirming care, which again is not on the table right now with this bill, that there's something that you feel makes it the correct course of action?
So thank you for that question, and I appreciate the opportunity to answer. I respectfully disagree that this bill is not about gender affirming care. As Dr. Levine has observed, there's a limited number of options for clinicians when they have a patient, a young person who's presenting with gender dysphoria. There's essentially what's called watchful waiting. There's the second one that's essentially working on the psychological comorbidities that typically accompany children presenting with gender dysphoria or cross-sex identification. And the third one is affirmation. The first two almost always result in the eventual alignment of the child's mind with the child's body. And thus it's fair to say that this law could make that illegal, because if you know it's going to happen, you have an intention to make it happen. You seek to essentially change or resolve the confusion that the kids have. So if you make illegal the first two things, you're absolutely 100% fostering the third thing. Now, as to your second question,
there was only one question.
100%. May I finish?
No, there was only one question, but you still really didn't answer it.
About what I think about conversion therapy on gay kids and all of those procedures, and I'm obviously opposed to these barbaric, horrific things. And I would encourage the committee to modify the legislation to identify these things specifically, rather than outlawing just plain old talk therapy. I encourage you to look at the Utah legislation, which identifies specifically the things that should be and ought to be illegal and are already unethical, as many of the witnesses have stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Rep. Reinigens.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I don't really have a question. I have more of a comment about the phrase that was used multiple times, that this bill might do more harm than good. And I just think that dead kids is harm that I don't want and I don't want to be responsible for. So not banning this results in dead kids. That's a harm I won't accept. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Rep. Reingans. Mr. Baylor, thanks so much for your testimony today, and thank you for being here. Next, we will have Gabrielle Dressner from the ACLU Michigan. She's here with us in person. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me to testify today. My name is Gabrielle Dressner. I'm the policy strategist with the ACLU Michigan and a social worker by trade. I'm here today to testify in support of these bills, which would protect LGBTQ kids from conversion therapy, a range of dangerous and discredited practices that falsely claim to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. As you've heard, many organizational experts in youth development, health, and mental well-being, including the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Physicians, and the American Medical Association, have all opposed conversion therapy on the basis that it is harmful and not an evidence-based practice. The United States Court of Appeals has repeatedly upheld conversion therapy bans in both California and Washington, reinforcing that these bans do not infringe on the First Amendment. Washington's ban, passed in 2018 and upheld in 2021 by a local district court and again in 2022 by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, is nearly identical to the bills in front of you today. In his opinion on the case, Circuit Judge Ronald Gold wrote, "States do not lose the power to regulate the safety of medical treatments merely because those treatments are implemented through speech rather than through scalpel." Similar to Washington's ban, House Bills 4616 and 4617 would regulate professional conduct, not constitutionally protected speech. No child should be subjected to the dangerous and torturous practice of conversion therapy. Therapy should be a place for learning, growth, and exploration, not shame and judgment. Being a member of the LGBTQ community is not something that needs to be cured, changed, or hidden. The ACLU of Michigan supports these bills and urges the committee to do the same. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Committee members, are there questions? Great. Thank you so much. Next on Zoom, we have Mr. Jonathan Alexander, who's Senior Counsel for the Liberty Council. Mr. Alexander, are you there?
I am.
Great, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Alexander. I'm an attorney and senior counsel for Liberty Counsel, and I am speaking in opposition to HB 4616 and 17, as these bills violate the First Amendment rights of counselors and their clients who wish to provide talk therapy to individuals who are struggling with their gender identity or sexual orientation. This unlawfully stops the opportunity of Michiganders who might be stressed out or frustrated or wrestling to discern their feelings. It stops them from even hearing life-saving ideas from a trained counselor. Because this bill is written to fix a problem which does not exist, the language trips over itself in a way that makes it impossible to understand, difficult to enforce, and never able to survive a constitutional challenge. Take these words from the bill, for instance. It both allows and then restricts talk therapy depending on whether the treatment is, quote, effort to change or identity exploration. And it says these things without providing any guidance on what differentiates the two. It's the difference between an effort to change or an identity exploration. It also says you cannot intervene to prevent or facilitate identity exploration. And that disallows the client any room to evolve or to adapt or to reduce or even eliminate certain feelings. And I know that I'm lending, for the sake of conversation, credibility to what is obviously a deeply flawed agenda that says that you can only recommend one outcome for same-sex attracted persons. It's either the bill's way or no way. No other viewpoints are welcome. All other viewpoints here are restricted. When laws like this have been tested in the court, our organization has won lawsuits preventing this sort of restriction. Most recently, it resulted in a $950,000 settlement in Tampa. right on the heels of another 11th Circuit victory, where the court held that such restrictions on speech are unconstitutional. But more importantly, and closer to home, there's testimony of so many people, including Walt Heyer, who needed talk therapy, needed it to fully heal and to repair from trauma and abuse or hurt, or just to reconcile unwanted attractions and to live a life that was in full agreement with either their faith or just what the client desired as an outcome for their therapy. And those clients are being intentionally blocked by this attempt. And for the sake of those that want to hear this and have needed to hear talk therapy, needed to hear that there's hope for them to heal certain unwanted sexual feelings, I urge this committee to give both of these bills an unfavorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. We'll start with Rep. Glanville.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies. I got a little bit lost in the testimony. What is your title again?
Senior Counsel for Governmental Affairs for Liberty Counsel.
So you are not a trained therapist or licensed psychologist of any kind?
We represent trained therapists and licensed psychologists all over the country.
I understand that. I'm trying to clarify your role. You are not a trained therapist or licensed psychologist, is that correct?
Our clients have been practicing for decades.
Sir, can you please
helping
answer the
individuals
question?
heal
I'm asking you a
unwanted
question. Are you a trained therapist or licensed psychologist of some kind? You.
To answer that question, ma'am, and no, but we
Thank
do
you.
represent individuals who are winning victories.
Thank you, Mr.
currently.
Alexander. Next, we have Representative Edwards.
Well, Rep. Glanville did take my question, but I do have a question of clarification. Does this bill eliminate talk therapy?
No, it does not.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Representative Pahutsky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last example that you gave about the person who had unwanted attractions, which, I mean, I think even straight people can relate to being attracted to people they don't want to be. But how old was that person?
It was an individual who lived as
How old was that person?
gender. Currently, he's 80 years old. He's much older now than.
Okay, so this
he
bill
was.
doesn't apply to him. And the other
If I can just clarify, the
No, you said that this bill would prevent him from accessing talk therapy, and it wouldn't. So, thank you for answering it. And the other thing you asserted, I have another question. Thank you,
Mr. Alexander. The rep has a question for you.
You asserted that these bills would never stand up to a constitutional challenge. What do you say about the fact that they've stood up to two of them? They've been upheld twice by different courts.
There's a circuit split where they have been struck down twice by two separate courts as well, and they're currently making their path towards the Supreme Court.
Sure.
The Supreme Court in Nifla v. Becerra had the opportunity to consider whether or not we're going to create an entire new class of talk, which was considered professional speech, and say that we can then silence that particular speech because it was done by a professional.
But
And
your statement that these would never
you
hold
have
up to a
to take
constitutional
little,
challenge has been patently false twice thus far.
At the same time, there's a circuit split when there are two circuit court decisions that have said that it is unconstitutional to silence the speech of individuals. And the First Amendment
That
is
was a yes,
clear
Madam
in that
Chair.
regard.
Thank you so much.
The Supreme
Thank you, Mr. Alexander, for your testimony today. We appreciate you being here. Next, we have, oops, I'm so sorry. Rep. Thompson? Mr. Alexander, are you still there?
I am still here, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Rep. Thompson has a question for you.
Hi, Mr. Alexander. You said that you are the counsel. You are a counsel. You are an attorney that represents psychologists and clinicians throughout the country. What is your clients' roles that you represent?
These are individuals that are sitting down with clients, most recently in Boca Raton, Dr. Otto, sitting down with clients and allowing them to work through past traumas, past abuses, and helping them work through what their feelings are, whether they're wanted or unwanted. We also represent Dr. David Pickup. He was the first individual to bring the case in the Ninth Circuit. He was a California counselor who at the same time and continues in his practice to help individuals that have unwanted sexual feelings one way or another based on past trauma, past abuse.
So
And
to
many-
clarify, are you here for any personal reasons, or are you here representing doctors and psychologists?
Here representing the opportunity for these individuals to continue to speak and to practice and to share with counselors, but from a personal perspective as well. There are many individuals, including one of my closest friends, David Reese, who, after undergoing trauma as a young man, struggled with his same-sex attraction throughout his life, but after receiving talk therapy, was able to overcome, was able to make congruency between his decided feelings and the direction he wanted to go. And he's a father of 2 wonderful children. He's married to his wife, Leanne. And so from a personal capacity, there are so many individuals that I know personally, Janet Boynes, their stories are all out there. Individuals that just needed to have a conversation with a counselor that was willing to listen to them, to unpack certain traumas, unpack certain abuse that could bring them closer to where they wanted to be all along. And that's what our efforts are. And so keeping individuals from just listening to a counselor or from talking out their feelings by having talk or the opportunity to share within this statute is what ultimately courts have found to be unconstitutional, and why this law, if passed, will not pass constitutional muster.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the fact that you were representing physicians and clinicians that are mental health providers. But thank you for expanding on that. Thank you.
Rep. Schmaltz.
Yes, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I just want to thank you for testifying today, and thank you to everybody for testifying in support or against the bills. I think it's very important that we listen to everybody on both sides and to make sure that they can finish their comments. So thank you very much.
Mr. Alexander, I actually have a question. Are the therapists who you're talking to, are they licensed?
Yes, they are.
And do we have any in the state of Michigan?
Not that I recall, no.
Oh, okay. So, I'm sorry, so you represent a group that doesn't have any therapists who are licensed in the state of Michigan here where we're doing the law?
Yeah, it's important to have a national perspective. I think many of the folks, proponents, were mentioning the several other states in which we are receiving the numbers from. I think one person mentioned the other 24 states that have considered that. And so I'm being able to bring a national perspective as well, to bring insight as to where this is going, how it's developed all across the country. But there are individuals certainly all across the country that have had the opportunity to sit down with folks and work through their feelings. It's something that this bill wants to stop.
Okay. Thanks so much for your testimony today. I really appreciate it. Next, we are going to have Doug Booth. He's here with us today. Doug is from the Grand Rapids LGBTQ Healthcare Consortium. Welcome, Doug.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Doug Booth. I am a dedicated member of the Board of Directors for the Grand Rapids LGBTQ Healthcare Consortium. We are an organization dedicated to improving healthcare access, experiences, and services for the LGBTQ community. Today, I stand before you as a representative of a powerful coalition that I have tirelessly built over the last 18 months. Our coalition was formed with the purpose to advocate for the banning of conversion therapy here within our state. It is an honor to share my testimony and actively contribute to this crucial discussion of safeguarding the well-being of LGBTQ youth here in Michigan. We must first acknowledge, as has been stated numerous times, that not a single reputable medical association supports the efforts of conversion therapy here within the nation. The American Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Nursing Association, among many others, have labeled conversion therapy dangerous and lacking any scientific merit. Furthermore, there exists an ever-growing body of evidence showcasing the severe harm and risks associated with this practice. Studies consistently reveal a significantly higher risk of mental health issues and suicidal attempts among individuals subjected to conversion therapy. The enduring effects of this harmful practice burden survivors with an estimated $83,000 in additional healthcare costs throughout their lives. Shockingly, this deplorable practice still persists here within our state. The genesis of our coalition can be traced back to a pivotal moment in December 2021 when I watched the thought-provoking documentary Pray Away on Netflix. This eye-opening documentary delves into the disturbing realities of conversion therapy practices here within our nation, shedding light on their prevalence and harmful nature. As we immersed ourselves in this narrative, memories of my own adolescence resurfaced, igniting a renewed sense of urgency and empathy within me. During my formative high school years, I found myself surrounded by communities where conversations about the LGBTQ community were tainted with disgust and fueled by intense animosity. Even at a tender age, I sensed deep within me that my feelings towards persons of the same gender as I deviated from societal norms. Yet, rather than embracing my truth, I grappled with the fear of rejection and a fervent desire to conform. I embarked on a painful journey to mold myself into what society deemed normal, unknowingly subjecting myself to a self-imposed form of conversion efforts. This struggle to fit in was inadvertently reinforced by those around me, at school, in church, and even within my own family. During those tumultuous years, I battled with severe depression, harbored persistent suicidal thoughts, and tragically even made an attempt to end my own life. Only years later, after accepting and embracing my authentic self, that I began to share my truth with others. These deeply emotional recollections and the profound pain that I experienced upon revisiting those memories serve as an unwavering catalyst for my determination, as well as of our coalition, to lift up our voices in the hope that positive change can occur. Our resolute goal is to reach out to every young person who may be grappling with their identity, reminding them that the world is undeniably a better place with them as they are rather than not at all. Each and every signature has a reputation of being dedicated to this cause and is driven by the hope that, with the science behind us, by banning this harmful practice, we will create a positive, long-lasting impact and foster a more inclusive and compassionate society. Our coalition has garnered the support of over 1,100 Michiganders, including healthcare practitioners, elected officials, business owners, and community leaders, as well as over 60 prominent organizations such as the University of Michigan Health West, Bethany Christian Services, Pine Rest Christian Mental Health Services, who used to do conversion therapy, the West Michigan Partnership for Children, the Children's Advocacy Center of Kent County, and many more. While we have focused on local bans initially, we soon realized the challenges related to enforcement at the local and city levels, compelling us to adapt our strategy multiple times. Following the 2022 midterms, we found a renewed hope and decided to redirect our focus here at the state level. In a time when the LGBTQ community faces hostility nationwide, as the headlines attest daily now, Michigan has an opportunity to continue to shine as a beacon of hope. We embrace the belief that our state should be a welcoming haven for all, recognizing the imperative of protecting the most vulnerable among us. I express my deepest gratitude and wholeheartedly support the swift and timely passage of these vital bills that will save the lives of our state's LGBTQ youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Rep. Glanville.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Booth, for being here today. I've had the pleasure of watching your work over the past couple of years, and I'm glad to hear all the information you were able to share with us today about the wide body of support that you've been able to pull together in the Grand Rapids area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, thank you, Mr. Booth.
Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Dr. Laura Haynes, and she is from the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice. She joins us via Zoom. Welcome.
Thank you. Members of the Michigan House Behavioral Health Subcommittee, I'm Dr. Laura Haynes, psychologist and USA Country Representative, speaking for the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice that serves professionals in more than 25 nations. We support client-directed, non-coercive, non-aversive therapy conversations to explore potential for managing, reducing, or changing undesired same-sex attraction or behavior and congruent gender identity. Thank you for the opportunity to share our concerns that a therapy ban will have seriously harmful consequences. Please consider the evidence. Therapy bans are usually based on a common belief that same-sex attraction and incongruent gender identity are inborn in who a person biologically is. We know of virtually no professional organization that agrees with this popular view. Even the American Psychological Association's APA Handbook of Sexuality and Psychology says same-sex sexuality does have psychoanalytic causes, may potentially be caused with childhood sexual abuse for some people based on research, and commonly changes through life experiences. People should be able to explore their sexuality, including these causes and potentials. Longitudinal quasi-experimental studies have found that people who reduced or changed same-sex attraction through therapy and their psychological well-being significantly improved. These studies are not perfect, but they are orders of magnitude better than studies that claim harm. Regarding gender identity, a highly regarded global consensus statement by endocrine societies around the world says there is no consistent evidence the brains of gender incongruent people are different. Gender dysphoria resolves in about 85% of children if they are not affirmed with cross-sex pronouns, names, or clothing, and in up to 30% of young people even after gender drugs have sterilized them for life. Research has found internationally that in adolescence, high rates of psychiatric conditions, including autism or suicidality, existed before onset of gender incongruence, therefore may have caused it. In disagreement with American organizations, the health authorities in Sweden, Finland, Norway, England, France, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand are now moving away from the affirmative approach. They are prioritizing psychotherapy that treats potentially underlying psychiatric causes, which a therapy ban would prohibit. This is a disaster. Worldwide, there is not a consensus for gender affirmative approach. By coercing affirmation, many children and adolescents will not naturally resolve their gender dysphoria, will not have underlying causes treated, and will be sterilized by gender drugs for life. Do you want to be responsible for this? A therapy ban would put therapists into double jeopardy. Ethically, therapists must inform patients of treatment options, such as treating underlying causes. Therapists will be in jeopardy of the law if they do so, and in jeopardy of lawsuits if they do not. They will have to sue the state immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Representative Arbit.
Ms. Haynes, is it?
Yes.
Dr. Haynes, my apologies.
Yes.
Have you read the bill?
Yes.
Okay. Where in the bill, can you point to me where in the bill there's a discussion over gender affirming care?
You're not insisting that people are affirmative?
I'm asking you if you can point me. I'm asking if you can point to me in the bill what line in the bill there is discussion over gender affirming care.
It says that it's okay to give support and so on to gender treatments, to medical treatments, I believe.
The bill is about banning conversion therapy, which is a pseudoscientific garbage practice that only results in mental abuse and trauma for young LGBTQ kids. Are you aware of that?
It also says that what conversion therapy does not mean, that it does not mean support for, I think that the intention is support for those who wish to identify as LGBT, and not support for those who do not wish to identify as that and who want to change.
So your testimony is immaterial to the bill at hand. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Colleagues, any other questions? Dr. Haynes, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Next, we are going to move to Matthew Skirka, who's here with us in the room. Matthew is from the National Center for Lesbian Rights and Born Perfect. Welcome. The red button right in front of you. There you go.
Great. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, members of the Michigan House Behavioral Health Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to express my support for House Bills 4616 and 4617, protecting minors from the dangerous practice of conversion therapy. My name is Matthew Shurka. I am representing the National Center for Lesbian Rights, a legal organization working to protect the civil and human rights of LGBTQ people. I'm also the co-founder of our Born Perfect campaign, a national campaign representing survivors of conversion therapy across the country, including myself, a survivor of conversion therapy. Our team has worked to protect LGBTQ youth by supporting legislation protecting those youth from conversion therapy. Thus far, 21 states and over 120 municipalities have passed such legislation or ordinances. Each of these laws passed with bipartisan support. Here in Michigan, the state will be codifying an already understood issue with extraordinary amounts of evidence that any attempts of conversion therapy are harmful, fraudulent, and may cause lifelong damage and potential suicide. Born Perfect hears from survivors every day who have experienced conversion therapy. We build data on firsthand accounts to track those therapists in each state. Our data shows that Michigan has 138 active conversion therapists. 38 of those individuals are licensed practitioners. In addition, 28 organizations within the state have been reported to be recommending and or participating in conversion therapy through a referral program with licensed practitioners within the state of Michigan. My personal experience in conversion therapy, unfortunately, aligns with the many harms reported by the National Mental Health and Medical Associations. I was in conversion therapy for 5 years, from ages 16 to 21. Each of my therapists during that time were licensed professionals. When I came out to my father made it clear how much he loved me and that I had nothing to fear. Yet my father began to search for a therapist to understand what my coming out may mean for my family and I. In meeting with a licensed therapist, my father was told that being gay was nothing more than a mental illness, that same-sex attraction can be cured, and that all people are innately heterosexual. The therapist further explained that childhood traumas were the cause of being LGBTQ, and that if I went to therapy and healed those childhood traumas, my same-sex attraction would disappear. For my father, this was a lifeline moment, that he could possibly give me a straight life instead of coming out as gay. I believed and trusted the therapist who was treating me, and I fully loved and trusted my father. Luckily for me, I did not have any significant childhood traumas, which my therapist found difficult while trying to find the cause of my homosexuality. He ultimately claimed that I was too close to my mother and 2 sisters and not close enough to my father. My first treatment required that I not speak to my mother and 2 sisters, which lasted 3 years. I was told this would ensure I would not pick up any effeminate behaviors or see girls and women as my peers, but to learn that the men and boys around me are my peers. While I truly believed conversion therapy was working, I became depressed and suicidal in year 2 of my time in therapy. When my therapist believed I was ready to engage with women sexually, I was instructed step by step how to engage with women in my environment, despite if I led those young women to believe our attractions or our love may be real or not. I suffered from extreme anxiety from that, and I was not able to sexually perform. In those moments, my therapist instructed me to take Viagra by prescribing them to my father in order to boost my confidence. As a young man, I did not suffer from erectile dysfunction. I was a young, healthy 17-year-old gay boy. During those 5 years, my parents spent a total of $30,000 on my conversion therapy. I dropped out of college at the time due to my debilitating depression and anxiety. The whole ordeal for me was artificial, humiliating, and demeaning. Every licensed therapist knows, or should know, this is a dangerous and fraudulent practice. Anyone who carries a license in the state of Michigan knows from their educational curriculum and those requirements to obtain a state license that conversion therapy has no scientific backing. Nonetheless, prescribing these fraudulent and harmful so-called treatments to children. I stand in support of passing HB 4616 and 4617. I would also like to note I submitted testimony on behalf of the Born Perfect campaign, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and a letter from the former Ex-Gay Leaders Alliance, a national group of 26 former providers of conversion therapy expressing their strong support in the passage of HB 4616 and 4617. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, anybody have questions? Thank you so much. And we will I just asked our clerk, we will also get that letter to folks so that they have it as well. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Kate Dahlstrom, who's on Zoom with us.
Yes, hi. My name is Kate Dahlstrom. I am in Traverse City. I'm on the board of Northern Lakes Community Mental Health, and I'm also on the board of NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, Grand Traverse. I am, however, not speaking on behalf of our full board, but I do support House Bills 4616 and 4617. And I think what I wanted to add too, while I was listening to this, is that the Supreme Court has, let me find this, and I think this is current, that on 3 occasions, April of 2019, February 16, May of 15, Supreme Court allowed decisions of the Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upholding New Jersey's anti-conversion therapy. SCOTUS also refused to hear challenges to California's anti-conversion therapy law in May of 17 and June of 14, leaving in place decisions of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, affirming the law's constitutionality. What I think is an even larger issue is that, and I think we can all agree on, is that any of our kids with an emotional disturbance need talk therapy is one part of the therapy that they need. They certainly don't need a therapy that's targeted towards converting them as a child to something they don't feel inside. But what they all need, though, is professional talk therapy that's done on a more holistic basis. And until the state of Michigan does more to provide for crisis stabilization units and those things that help all these kids with emotional disturbances, we are in a boatload of trouble. Our 21 counties up here in northern Michigan have zero beds for kids in inpatient psych, and we have 0 beds for kids in crisis residential. Our so-called leaders are afraid to initiate crisis stabilization services because the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services has still not, and may not for 4 to 5 years, have rules and reimbursements for crisis stabilization services for our young people. So this is, in my mind, a huge priority. All of our kids are in a world of trouble. They're suicidal. They need the therapy, but they need, especially when there's a crisis, they need a place to go. And until there is funding or a guarantee that a crisis stabilization center will continue to be funded, that yes, go ahead and get this thing going so our kids are not boarded in the emergency department for 2 weeks, a month or more, then we're going to struggle. So I'm sorry if I got off track a little bit, but I mean, we have to do something. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks for joining us from Traverse City. Colleagues, any questions? Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. The final person testifying today is Erin Knott, the Executive Director of Equality Michigan. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Erin Knott. My pronouns are she and her and hers. I'm going to take my time to summarize what you've heard today and to put a finer point on a couple of items. Yesterday, in the Senate hearing, Senator Schenck used the term quackery to describe conversion therapy. A bit later that morning, or early afternoon rather, Senator McMorrow followed up with the word torture. I want to highlight right now both the how physically extreme, the torturous practice of conversion therapy can be, as well as how equally dangerous the non-physical side of the practice is. As you're well aware, torture is illegal in the United States and banned by international law. In fact, according to the Innocence Project, about 25% of wrongfully convicted innocent people were coerced into making false confessions. I think that we can all agree incarceration or conviction under coercion is wrong. It's my hope today that we can agree that when you are a 12-year-old and forced to watch pornographic material and pair the experience with heat or ice on your genitalia, or given pharmaceuticals to induce nausea or vomiting, or even administered electroshock therapy, this too is torture. While most practitioners today engage in talk therapy, you cannot shame, talk or train stereotypical gender norms, teach heterosexual dating skills, or use hypnosis to cure one's sexual orientation or gender identity. Let me put a finer point on this. Talk therapy elements are just as harmful. There are clinicians who, without accessing or knowing the client, enter the relationship with the predetermined goal of changing their client's sexual orientation or gender identity. To do this, they insert two key notions. Number one, that being gay or transgender is inherently wrong, sinful, or an illness. Number two, that it's possible to change and make these feelings or urges go away if you just try hard enough. So the child they are treating hears, quote, "I'm broken, but I can be unbroken. I just need to try hard." And they do try hard. Things that they do, the practitioner tells them to do, should be doing, they do this over and over, they repeat it, but the feelings just aren't going away. The child continues to see the practitioner, and the message gets reinforced each time that the child is broken. But with enough effort, they can be fixed. Maybe by this point, the practitioner escalates what it means to try hard. Minutes ago, we heard from my colleague Matthew with Born Perfect. You heard the personal experience that he went through, but let me recap what it means to try hard. Perhaps it's stop talking to effeminate people, even if that includes one's sister and mother, aunts, etc. If you're an older teenager, perhaps it's having sex with women, even if they need performance-enhancing medication to do so. In essence, the practitioner has broken the client. The practitioner has broken a human being. There are many things that young people need, but breaking them down based on their sexual orientation or gender identity is not one of them. In fact, it's inexcusable. To be clear, the intent of the bills before you are to protect youth who are vulnerable to harm or violence, whether that occurs in a medical or commercial context. These bills are not trying to prevent LGBTQ youth or people or kids from seeking legitimate medical support or spiritual support from their faith leaders in their exploration of their sexual orientation or gender identity. We are here today to change the law, not the child. This is a suicide prevention bill, period. You also heard from my colleague Gwen with the Trevor Project that they estimate 58,000 Michigan LGBTQ youth have seriously considered suicide. Our young people deserve acceptance, support, and love. To the young people who question their identities, suffer from bullying, or struggle with what it means to come out today, your voices are being heard. Equality Michigan enthusiastically stands in support of House Bill 4616 and 4617. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions for the Executive Director? Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Knott. We appreciate you being here. All right, we have some cards that I'm going to read in before we take up these bills. Rebecca Masti from the Michigan Catholic Conference does not wish to speak, opposes the bill. Patricia Barton from the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy does not wish to speak, supports the bills. Colin Ford from the Michigan chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics does not wish to speak and supports the bills. Sean Sorensen Abbott from Michigan Health and Hospital Association does not wish to speak and supports the bills. Jeff Hewson from Michigan Family Forum does not wish to speak and opposes the 4616. Kim Ross from Michigan Medicine does not wish to speak and supports both bills. Sade Burton from our Department of Health and Human Services does not wish to speak and supports both bills. Dakota Torlaski from Human Rights Campaign does not wish to speak and supports both bills. Monica Martinez from the Michigan School of Psychology does not wish to speak and supports both bills. Terry Torchinsky from the Michigan School Counselors Association does not wish to speak and supports both bills. Mitch Albers from the Department of the Attorney General supports both bills, does not wish to speak. Stephanie Cruz from Heritage Action does not wish to speak and opposes both bills. Julie Cassidy from the Michigan League for Public Policy does not wish to speak and supports both bills. Megan Blue from Corewell Health does not wish to speak and supports both bills. And finally, Michael Pine from With One Voice does not wish to speak, supports both bills. There you go. Thanks, Madam Clerk. So colleagues, thank you for spending the time today and listening to our testimony, both for folks who are in support of these bills and folks who are opposed to them. I appreciate you all and your engagement around this process. Right now, we're going to have the vote to refer are you okay? House Bill 4616 to the House Health Policy Committee. Representative Putsky makes a motion to refer House Bill 4616 to Health Policy Committee. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Chair Brayback.
Yes.
Representatives Arbit,
Yes.
Pahetsky,
Yes.
Glanville,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Reingens,
Yes.
Schmaltz,
Pass.
Hoadley,
Pass.
St. Germain,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays, 4 pass. House Bill 4616 is referred to the Health Policy Committee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we will take up House Bill 4617. First, we have two amendments. Minority Vice Chair Schmaltz, your amendment is first. Do you wish to speak to your amendment?
My amendment just pretty much narrows the definition of conversion therapy and makes it more clear, in my opinion.
Great, thank you. Madam Clerk, will you call the vote on the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry, you need to move your amendment. I'm sorry. Okay. You just need to say, so moved.
So moved, sorry.
To adopt the amendment to House Bill 4617, Chair Brayback.
No.
Representatives Arbit,
No.
Pahetsky,
No.
Glanville,
No.
Edwards,
No.
McDonald,
No.
Reingens,
No.
Schmaltz.
Yes.
Hoadley,
Yes.
St. Germain,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 4 yeas, 7 nays, 0 pass. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Rep. Hoadley, we next have your amendment. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to add that it is an amendment to clarify the definition as well, and also to tighten up the language in those definitions to help the bill live up to its intent to protect Michigan youth.
Great, move your amendment.
And I so move.
Perfect. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
To adopt the Hoadley amendments, Chair Brayback.
No.
Representative Arbit,
No.
Pahetsky,
No.
Glanville,
No.
Edwards,
No.
McDonald,
No.
Reingens,
No.
Schmaltz,
Yes.
Hoadley,
Yes.
St. Germain,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 4 yeas, 7 nays, 0 pass. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now have a vote to refer House Bill 4617 to the House Health Policy Committee. Representative Arbit will make a motion to refer House Bill 4617 to the Health Policy Committee. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Chair Brayback.
Yes.
Representatives Arbit,
Yes.
Pahetsky,
Yes.
Glanville,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Reingens,
Yes.
Schmaltz,
Pass.
Hoadley,
Pass.
St. Germain,
Pass.
Thompson.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays, 4 pass. House Bill 4617 is referred to the Committee on Health Policy.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate it. Colleagues, just so you know, the process that we're going to have in front of us, since having a subcommittee we haven't done in a number of years. Now what will happen is tomorrow I will be testifying in health policy about what happened here today and offering that to them, and they will take up that vote. So I'll keep you all posted, but that's kind of the process from here. And then it's the typical process that we're used to then with a vote on the floor to be determined. But thank you again, colleagues. I really appreciate it. This is a historic moment. We've never taken a vote on conversion therapy ban, and I am proud to stand with all of you at this moment. So thank you all so much, and I will see you all tomorrow. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.